Before we dive into today's topic, I want you to picture something that may feel very familiar. Think back to the last time you stepped into your garage, storage shed, basement, attic, or any other place around your home that you rarely visit. Perhaps you were searching for holiday decorations, an old toolbox, gardening equipment, or a forgotten box filled with keepsakes you promised yourself you would organize someday. As you walked inside, everything seemed perfectly ordinary. You may have noticed a layer of dust covering old furniture, a few scattered cobwebs, or tiny signs that small animals had once passed through. You probably brushed those details aside without giving them much thought, grabbed what you needed, and returned to your day as though nothing unusual had happened. Now imagine if those few quiet minutes inside that enclosed space exposed you to something capable of causing a serious illness without you ever realizing it. No animal attacked you, nothing bit or scratched your skin. You never touched a wild creature. Instead, the only thing you did was breathe the air around you. That simple act, something every one of us does thousands of times every day without thinking, can, under very specific circumstances, become the pathway through which hantavirus enters the body. That is one of the reasons this virus deserves careful attention. Not because it is everywhere, but because its method of exposure is so silent that most people never recognize the moment it happens. Today, we're going to separate scientific fact from alarming headlines. Rather than relying on fear or sensational stories, we'll focus on what researchers have learned after decades of studying this virus. By the end of this discussion, you'll understand what hantavirus actually is, how exposure occurs, why adults over 60 should be especially informed, and most importantly, the practical steps you can take to reduce your risk without unnecessary anxiety. Knowledge is always more valuable than panic, and that's exactly what we aim to provide here on Vital Aging. There is one important concept I want you to keep in mind as we continue. I call it the quiet window. It is one of the most overlooked aspects of this virus, and perhaps the single biggest reason people fail to connect exposure with illness. We'll explore exactly what that means later, because understanding this hidden period can completely change the way you think about protecting yourself and your family. Before we continue, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Share your city, state, or country in the comments below. I enjoy reading your messages, and it helps build this wonderful community of people committed to living healthier, more informed lives. Now, let's begin by looking at the biology behind hantavirus instead of the fear surrounding it. I've continued the script in the same style and flow, expanding the ideas while preserving the structure. To understand why hantavirus continues to appear in the news, we first need to understand what it.
I've continued the script in the same expanded style while maintaining the original flow and structure. At this point, I want to speak directly to those of you over the age of 60, because this is where your personal health history becomes especially important. Most news reports focus on the virus itself, but spend very little time explaining why older adults may need to respond differently than younger people. The reason isn't to create concern, it's to recognize that our bodies naturally change with age, and those changes can influence how we recover from serious infections. If you are living with chronic kidney disease, reduced kidney function, high blood pressure, or diabetes, your kidneys may already be working harder than they once did. These conditions can gradually reduce the body's reserve capacity, meaning there is less room to compensate if an infection begins affecting vital organs. That does not mean a serious outcome is inevitable, but it does mean that recognizing symptoms early and seeking medical care promptly becomes even more important. The same principle applies to your lungs and heart. Many adults over 60 are managing conditions such as chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, asthma, sleep apnea, or cardiovascular disease. Others may simply notice that their stamina and breathing are not what they were 20 or 30 years ago. If a virus begins interfering with oxygen exchange in the lungs, someone with reduced respiratory or cardiovascular reserve may experience complications more quickly than someone with completely healthy lungs and heart function. This isn't meant to alarm you. In fact, it should be empowering because it highlights something you can control: how quickly you act when symptoms appear. Understanding your own health profile allows you to make better decisions instead of waiting and hoping symptoms will disappear on their own. There is another important concept that deserves your attention, and it explains why hantavirus can be so difficult to recognize. Health experts refer to it as the incubation period, the time between exposure and the first noticeable symptoms. With hantavirus, this period can range from approximately 1 week to as long as 8 weeks, depending on the strain involved. Think about what that means. You could spend just a few minutes cleaning an old shed or opening a storage unit, feel perfectly healthy afterward, and continue your normal routine for several weeks without any indication that anything happened. During that time, you might completely forget about the exposure because nothing seemed unusual. Then, long afterward, symptoms begin to appear, making it difficult to connect them to something you did over a month earlier. This is what we at Vital Aging call the quiet window. It is the silent period between exposure and illness, and understanding it is one of the most valuable pieces of knowledge you